We've forgotten that there's a God that we have to answer.
Dealing with people who reject truth.
I'm wondering in my mind why life is so difficult for me.
340 million people who are suffering.
Real stories.
Here's a man who's responsible for almost 7 billion people.
Real issues.
How much does peer pressure actually exist?
And real views.
Gangs exist at every level.
This is Real Talk.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Real Talk USA. Today we will be discussing prejudice and religious intolerance, how individuals have experienced it, what communities have done to deal with it, and how we as individuals can overcome, overpower, and probably even actually combat these issues. These topics and more we will explore today on Real Talk. Allow me to introduce our panelists. We have Mr. Ahmad Fadlallah, who actually was a principal over at Fortson High School. This high school was had a majority population of Arab Americans and Muslim Americans. For 30 years, he was actually an educator in the Dearborn public school system. We have Mr. Abdullah Ali, who is a university student at the University of Michigan. He's studying biochemistry and is a senior there. He also actually attended the high school at Fortson High and was a student there at that time. We have Mr. John Oram, who is a community activist leader with the Chaldean community here in southeastern Michigan. He has been dealing and working with the Obama administration as well as the Clinton administration in the past. And we have Mr. Majib Ijaz, who is the Assistant National Secretary for Public Relations for the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. Let's take a look at the word on the street before we continue on with our discussion.
August the 8th, 1983. It was on this date, at this very house, that Dr. Muzaffar Ahmad Saab was tragically shot dead and martyred, later to be discovered by his wife and young son. Dr. Muzaffar Ahmad Saab was a simple family man who lived with his wife and young son in Canton, Detroit. He was a peace-loving individual and a sincere and devout member of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. A physician by trade, he practiced at the Wayne County General Hospital.
The way that the story started was a year prior to that. There was an imam, a Maulvi that came from Pakistan. He became an imam of one of the local mosques, local African-American mosques. And there he began preaching the sentiment of basically hatred and prejudice towards Ahmadis. There was an upcoming Jalsa, a Jalsa Salana that was to be held in Detroit that year. And he had put together a plan to disrupt that Jalsa. And he engaged two of the members of that community to execute this plan. The plan was to martyr members of our community and then burn the mosque. So the way they carried it out was 2 months prior to this Jalsa, there was a phone call that was made to this very mosque. And one of those members called to ask if someone in the mosque could give them information about Ahmadiyya. We were holding meetings at the time in preparation for the Jalsa. It was upstairs in this very building. I was sitting right next to the phone actually when it rang. And one of our members picked the phone up, took the request, and actually asked our membership who would like to volunteer to give this person information about Ahmadiyya. And Dr. Muzaffar Shaheed raised his hand and said, please give him my information. This person contacted Dr. Muzaffar, and Dr. Muzaffar invited him to his home. He befriended this person and started communicating and teaching him about Ahmadiyya. 1 week prior to the day, it was August 8th, 1983, this person left a hat. Weeks prior to, left a hat at Dr. Muzaffar's house. And on that day, this would be the excuse to go back and actually kill Dr. Muzaffar Shaheed. En route, they called Dr. Muzaffar and asked him if they could come and if he could come and pick up his hat. He went to the home, rang the doorbell. Dr. Muzaffar was entertaining a guest there at dinner. When he came to the door, this person shot Dr. Muzaffar right in the foyer of his own home. And that's where he actually died.
This barbaric event was a consequence of prejudice and sheer intolerance. Dr. Muzaffar Ahmad Saab Shaheed was an innocent man and had done nothing to meet this most perilous fate. The two perpetrators, Calvin Jones and William Kane, continued on their rampage and proceeded here to the Ahmadiyya Mission House on Wyoming Street.
They broke in the upstairs window from the back of the building and began to dispense and scatter the gasoline all over the upstairs floor. Then they came to the downstairs and went to the front of the building and began to scatter gasoline all over the building again, making their way towards the back of the building where there was a large door from which they planned to escape after setting fire to the mosque. But they didn't realize that there was actually a gas water heater in the back of the building that had a pilot lit. So as they sprinkled their gasoline, the gas pilot actually ignited the fumes and the entire mosque went up in flames while they were in the mosque. They attempted to get out of the back door, but they couldn't. There was a very large steel door. They tried to get through the door, but the door handle was broken. The door handle was broken for years, and we used to take the handle off and actually set it on the shelf just next to the handle. In the midst of all of the commotion, they couldn't find the door handle. And they had guns. They tried shooting holes through the door. They couldn't get through. It was a solid steel door. And eventually, they went into the bathroom where the water heater was. The bathroom was enclosed in concrete, where they actually died as a function of smoke inhalation. So justice was actually served right in that mosque. Both Calvin Jones and William Kane, the two perpetrators of all of this, both came to their demise in the mosque that they tried to set on fire.
Attacks of this kind are unfortunately common in some parts of the Asian subcontinent. But this was the first incident of this type of a hate crime on American soil ever recorded against the Ahmadiyya community.
The entire mosque was burned to nothing. It was, the upstairs completely collapsed. There was no upstairs. You could stand in that area right there, look up and see the ceiling 2 floors above you. The entire floor had burned down and disintegrated. So just behind me, there were, in cardboard boxes, about 2,000 Quran Sharifs. There was a refrigerator that was located in this area in the kitchen. You couldn't tell it was a refrigerator because it had actually melted as a function of the heat. But those Quran Sharifs, those 2,000 Quran Sharifs, not a single one of them burnt. And even today, we use them in this mission house and also in our new mosque that was built in Rochester, Michigan. So it's a miracle that the entire building was burned. There was nothing left other than the brick and concrete of this building. Yet 2,000 Quran Sharifs sit in cardboard boxes in the middle of the mosque.
This was no random attack. All of the events leading to this crime were planned methodically well in advance by the perpetrators. They were religious extremists who had been brainwashed by their corrupt leaders into committing this heinous crime.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Real Talk USA. Today we have been discussing prejudice and religious intolerance, and what we want to do is see if we can overcome this idea of prejudice, see what we can do to actually rise above the religious intolerance in our world and what we can do to combat it. Now, panel, by my understanding, when we look at religious tolerance, being religiously tolerant, one would need to know and understand other religions. Would you agree, Mr. Ali?
Yes, I completely agree with that. The reason I think that is because if you're coming in with a basic understanding of another person's religion, another person's way of life, you might assume a lot of things. You might assume the actions they perform. You might think that, oh, because I'm fasting, I'm trying to starve myself. or oh, I have to go pray because I have to worship the moon god, things like that. If I'm actually, if I was to take an active role in educating, my friend that I go to school with, that I go to lunch with, that I just see on a daily basis, I think we'll be fine because people are accommodating, they're understanding, but you have to make the effort for that to happen.
Right, and the education as well.
Yes.
Mr. Fadl, being an educator for over 30 years, would you like to give more of an insight on that?
It's very difficult sometimes to fully comprehend and understand prejudices because sometimes it has no foundation. At times it has no foundation. Sometimes people hijack the real issue into an area of prejudice because they want to cover up other deficiencies.
Could you give an example?
I'll give you a simple example. If I walk into a teacher's classroom and I tell that teacher when I conduct an evaluation that basically 10 kids in your class were sleeping and 5 other kids were not paying attention, and I'm discussing the evaluation with that teacher, and basically that teacher tells me, well, you're doing this because you want to get rid of the Christian teachers in the building. No, this has nothing to do with religion. Religion is not the issue here. And I don't need to defend myself when it comes to understanding other religions. I've attended private schools all my life. I was practically raised with nuns. So I know about Christianity probably a lot more than you do as a Christian. So don't use that religion card on me. This is not the issue that we're discussing here. What we're discussing is, can you teach or you can't teach?
Of course, of course. Mr. Jaz, do we notice a lot of places around the world as well, a lot of the third world nations where there is a selective one religion and they have that type of mindset? Is that the root a lot of the problem of religious intolerance when there aren't other religions present and around?
Yeah, I think that having a conversation about religion is different in different cultures. You could say that in the United States, separation of church and state has taught us to not typically talk about religion in the workplace or let's say at school. It's not a normal topic. The difficulty with that is it prevents the cross-pollination, it prevents the education, it prevents the interfaith dialogue that we really need. And I think that you could say before 9/11, the United States had a very large vacuum of understanding of what it meant to be a Muslim. Many people only had the peripheral hearsay or whatever the media would educate, but they didn't have a real thorough and deep understanding of what Muslim Americans were all about.
Of course.
And so I think that the topic of interfaith dialogue has become better. I think people realize the need to gain a better understanding of each other's religions. And I don't think that's universal around the world as to whether or not it's acceptable in society to talk about religion in the context of workplace or school. And that may then result in different levels of understanding and interfaith dialogue around the world.
Of course, and obviously that interfaith dialogue should be widespread, not just selective towards one group, right?
Yeah,
so if we,
that's right.
let's say for example, we take a look at the audience, has anyone here actually taken any initiative to learn about other types of religions to maybe bridge that gap a little bit? Yes, Naima.
Assalamu alaikum. So when I came to United States, I didn't know much about Christianity, and I would think differently about Christian friends. So I took the initiative with a friend of mine, took a Bible study course, and I learned a lot about Christianity. And that really changed my mind and how I think about my Christian friends.
Sakala, yes. Anyone else? Chicago, yes.
I in fact had a similar experience where in order for me to learn more about the Christian society, I actually took Bible classes. And everything was hunky-dory until I started asking questions about natural questions that would come up. Me being a Muslim, asking questions. So I found out that was actually, in the setting that I was in, it didn't work out for me as good as I thought. for the intention that I had of exploring and getting to know other people. So I found a boundary there where you can do that as long as you don't ask too many questions. And personally, I still haven't found out the boundary as to where you draw that line of not asking too many questions, you know, or where do you draw the line?
Of course, that's very interesting. Mr. Fadlallah?
It's a comfort zone. It's the comfort zone. Iraqis that came from Iraq in the last 10 years, the United States government had what's so-called like camps for these Iraqis all over the United States. And you see a large percentage of them found their way back into Dearborn because, or the Detroit metro area in general. Why? Because there is a comfort zone. Because somebody knows somebody that may help me to get a job. I know that in Dearborn there is a mosque. I know I can buy halal meat. I know I may be able to send my kids to an Islamic school, and so on and so forth. So, yes, and the fact that I don't speak English doesn't make it any easier. You know, I may be able to get away with not speaking English in Dearborn for a while because there is always someone that can help me and guide me in the right direction while I learn English. So this is a fact of life. I mean, we are not the first community that did that. The Italians did that, the Chinese did that. I mean, every other community out there did that. They came where the magnet is that attracted them to settle in a specific society.
So let's see if we could look into the future then. We're living in a post 9/11 type of world. What can we do then in order to get maybe use that comfort zone either to our advantage and still be able to bridge a gap amongst other religions and other people, or what can we do to actually move forward and come out of that comfort zone and bridge a gap between other religions so that we can limit that religious intolerance? Is that possible at all? Do you think so?
Yes, I do think it is. Just because, like, if I was, as a Muslim American, I don't really have to impose my beliefs on somebody else, and I don't expect somebody else to do the same thing to me. If we're trying to assimilate as an American, in this culture, if we're trying to assimilate through self-assertion, I think we can still hold on to our beliefs, but also understand that somebody else may not think the same thing.
True. Let's say they are trying to impose. Well, maybe
Yeah.
even not even go so far as to impose. But let's say
yeah.
they're giving you a hard time, being prejudicial. What kind of things can you do specifically to combat it? What kind of things can you do to maybe at least make the society a little bit better so that you could change that type of prejudicial mindset of the individual?
Honestly, you're going to have to take the effort to go to the people themselves. If the people keep, saying, hey, why do you always shy away after class? You never try to come hang out with us, come party with us. You have to let them know that, hey, I have a different way of doing my own thing, but I'm able to relate to you.
Of course, yeah, that's interesting in culture.
Yeah. Can I give an example about this specifically?
Yeah.
I had a 14-year-old student that come to me and said, my wrestling coach took me on a field trip on Sunday to Puerto Huron. And while I was there, he had his son push me underwater. He had his daughter take my picture. And when I came out of the water, he put his hand on my head and he said, hallelujah, now you're a Christian.
Baptism.
Yeah, so this kid came to me crying and he said, this was done to me. Now, I had no choice because I have to abide by the fine line of the separation of church and state. So I called that coach and I said, did you do this? He said, yes, I did this on a Sunday afternoon. It's none of your business. I said, yeah, it is none of my business, but this kid happens to be a student of yours and a student of mine. So that becomes my business. I'm giving you the short version of this. This is something that was imposed, and this is something that created a big, huge issue in the community of what was done.
Right.
After 9/11, I think we became an easy target. We as Muslims, we became an easy target because our wings got broken. What we need to do is we need to educate. It set us back at least 20 years behind. We need to re-educate the masses, and we need to make sure that people understand the true message of Islam.
And how specifically can we do that, Mr. Joss?
Get involved.
Mr. Orm, by all means, please, yeah.
Get involved. I believe you touch on my subject that I deal with government all the time. from a local law enforcement officer to the Bill Daley, Chief of Staff of the White House a couple months ago at a conference. And we were educating them. Actually, sometime when you come to America, example, we just talk about America, because everything, as the principals say, in private, starts here, kind of goes there. It doesn't come from there to here, I can assure you that. You need to educate the people to understand what's going on.
How specifically can you do that, though? We always say we need to educate. We always say we just need to learn more.
I'll give you an example, Mar. 9/11, I was in Canada. I have a huge corporation there at the time. I was called by high officials in the government. We need you. Where the hell are these Arabs that are blowing up New York? I'm talking about literally hours after. I drove back across the bridge. Everything was all over the place. We had no idea what happened. This is like very true story. First time going on TV, I don't really care. But we got in vans. We went down to the mosque in Dix, and I started picking up the people I know in Dearborn that were involved in the community. And I started bringing them to these officials, because what they were thinking of 9/11 on a local base, state level, and federal level, is to put all the Arabs or nationality of people in camps, just like they did with the Japanese, just like they did with everybody else. People forget these things. So what we did, we went on attack. And what I mean we went on attack, we went on a positive attack. And all of us, like, if we would have been having this conference on 9/11 strike, we could get picked up. People forget that. That's prejudice, and that's religionism, and that's the tolerance that the principals talk about, then the students and are being taught by these teachers think they are right. So we basically went to Dearborn. We got a bunch of people. We got lucky that things got a little cooler to communicate, but it wasn't.
And you were able to have some form of dialogue, by my understanding.
It was, but it wasn't Washington making the decision. It wasn't, there was no system.
Right.
There was no system.
I see what you mean. What I want to get at, though, is that what steps, like for example, we have an audience here, a youth audience, that is going to be faced with these types of issues, this type of prejudice. What steps can we take specifically going forward to actually limit that prejudicial mindset and limit that religious intolerance that we view? Mr. Ajaz.
So you have to create forums, because ultimately what we're doing here today, the fact that these guests that we invited to come on Real Talk are willing to share their experiences is educating a worldwide viewing audience of what our experiences are here today and giving people perspective. But this is now impossible unless we create this forum to do it. So what I would say, a youth, if I were giving advice to someone in high school or college setting, is I would say hold a seminar. Hold a seminar and invite 3 or 4 of your friends that have different perspectives and different religions, and just share each other's perspectives on it. Pick a subject and share each other's perspectives. Because in the end, the highest degree of prejudice exists when you don't actually know anyone from that other group that you're prejudicial against, but you let the stereotype define them.
All right, let's see if we go back
so
to...
I think that creating a forum would be what I would ask the youth to think about doing, and then that will help the interfaith dialogue.
Of course. We have some youth here. Let's see, we'll get some ideas as to what has been done so far in order to limit prejudice and religious intolerance. Let's actually get some people that have not spoken just yet. Not just what has happened, but what you think you can do. Hamza?
Well, in our schools, we have different clubs for different faiths, like Christianity club and Muslim club. I think what we need to do is have a club for open-minded people who actually care about what the other people think.
So instead of having one or the other, kind of have a mix between both.
Yes, because every open-minded person has a friend who doesn't want to learn about that other religion. So you need to kind of spread it out between the open-minded people so they can spread on the message about coming together and having brotherhood.
Raza, do you think something like that would be able to work?
Yeah, definitely. Something like that would definitely work, because when you have all these clubs, such as in our school, we have just a Muslim Student Association, and they're mostly just centered around learning about just what their own religion is instead of learning more about Christianity or Judaism or other religions. If more people from different religions come together, I think that's going to be a lot better, because it's just going to create more knowledge about everything else.
Have you personally felt any type of and have you ever felt that anybody has prejudicial beliefs towards you over at your school regarding you as because you're a Muslim? Is what I mean.
Well, not me individually that much because I'm from Troy High School and that's one of the more diverse areas. So people from my school are like extremely accustomed to Muslims, Asians, different races, different religions.
All right, has anybody actually had any type of prejudice be imposed on them and they were able to overcome it with some form of an idea? Masood?
Like I mentioned earlier, that I'm a retail business owner, so I'm at the mall every single day. And a lot of times you'll encounter people that are open to other beliefs and different kind of people, but you always run into somebody that's not going to get your point of view. And they have negative thoughts, like right when they see you, before you start talking, they already have a negative image against you, and you cannot change that. But it's more important if they see you, like most of the people will get it, you know, and there's a lot of people that I see on a regular basis that at the first, when they saw me, they didn't want to approach me or talk to me. But eventually, after a while, like, you know, that's how you can also educate them.
Now that's an interesting. What about the ones that won't ever get it? Like you say something of that nature, where we can say, yes, you could educate, you could try and explain, and sometimes you'll be able to get a dialogue going. But what about the ones that you know very well, okay, that mind is way too closed, this isn't going to happen. How do we change something like that? Mr. Fadlallah.
Well, with all due respect, with some people you just have to leave them behind. I mean, if you've tried everything that you can try and you've done everything that you could do in order to educate these people, there isn't much that you can do. I mean, they're going to be a negative energy and they're going to waste your time and your effort. I think it is time to move on and concentrate on the people that will be willing to hear that message. You know, I wanted to mention something earlier that about 3 weeks ago I attended a conference in Germany with the State Department, and there was a delegation, about six of us that went from the United States and supposedly helped the German government how to address extremism, because that's the buzzword that is going on right now. The code words that I heard and the code words that you should all be paying attention to are very, very critical. Right now there is a code word called Islamism. There is another code word called Islamists. You know, those words, personally, I have never heard those words before. But somewhere in Washington and around this nation, there are think tanks that plug these code words into the media. The media take those code words and they create this big, scary monster called Islamism.
Seems to be a bit of a conspiracy theory.
Well, Islamism, no, it's not a conspiracy theory, it's happening.
Oh.
Because I heard it in Germany, and a couple days ago, I met with a group from Belgium, and I heard the same language from the people in Belgium. This is happening. Islamism equates to fascism. This is the area that they intend to put us in, that we have the same belief system as the fascism. So every one of us is responsible to really portray the true image of Islam.
So over at the Fortson High School, what exactly were your students and you yourself able to do in order to create that type of change?
The very first goal that I saw after getting my feet wet and after fully understanding is I need to educate these kids. When I started at Fortson High School in 2004, we had one student entering the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. In 2010, when I left, I had 70 attending the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. I had over 100 students accepted to U of M, Ann Arbor. So I believe planting a seed and making sure that that tree is gonna grow, I believe that we planted those seeds and those trees are growing and those trees are gonna educate the masses. Because let's face it, in America, when you get a good solid education, when you attend one of the top universities in the nation, when you get out, you're gonna get a job, you're gonna be powerful, and you're gonna be making critical decisions.
Of course, of course. You know, Mr. Ajaz, I'm curious that with this type of mindset of educating, of actually finding some type of uplifting goal to actually get to and be able to succeed by it. You mentioned beforehand the Ahmadiyya Muslim community having persecution also elsewhere around the world. Do you think it's possible for the Ahmadiyya Muslim community to do the same steps and be able to come out victorious?
Sure. I think that providing a voice to the people that are disenfranchised, that are persecuted in Pakistan, by going to world leaders in European countries, England, Germany, France, Spain, going to the US government, with our community leaders in countries that have the capability of bringing to light our issues on a world stage with the United Nations, with various organizations that can help put a spotlight on what's going on in Pakistan, we can make a difference.
Now, what can the youth possibly do, though? Because right now what we're looking at is the idea that the youth, apparently from our understanding, has a bit more of a liberal mindset when it comes to religious tolerance. Unfortunately, the elderly, the older generation have a different type of mindset. So what can we tell the youth? What can they specifically do in order to fix the situations going on, not only in our own country, but abroad as well?
Well, I think that making it clear to our leaders, every one of the citizens here in this room has a congressman. And you can write to that congressman and say that to this community, human rights in Pakistan matters, and get that on their radar. In fact, every one of the politicians that represents us in this country will not know that we have a concern unless we tell them we have a concern. So the absence of our voice is the worst thing that we can do. So really having that voice and getting that to be known by the people that represent us is our most important responsibility.
Mr. Oram, you've actually dealt with many members of Congress, is that correct?
Yeah, I just want to
Do
make
you
sure.
think that Mr. Ijaz's
I
answer is
understood
correct?
where your community is coming from earlier when I had this discussion during a break.
That's actually, yeah, where was your community successful in that regards as well, going to
Absolutely.
the
When us Chaldeans from northern Iraq, we got caught really in the ringer, as Majim was explaining to me where your community is from in Pakistan and other part of the world, and you're going to be suffering with it. No matter what happened for years, I didn't know the difference till the Iraq-Iran war, till later on in Kurdistan war. People don't forget Iraq example, and everybody talks about certain countries, and we hear. And we've been having wars there since, I don't know, when my dad was born in 1900 or something, I don't know. The problem we had is the congressman and the president and other people, and I'm speaking for myself, I'm not speaking for this government at all. I do influence it if I have to on a cause like this one, is that when it's no different than the young kids are talking about in school and that you saw in student, the big kid, the little kid, the smart kid, this other kid. Countries use that. Religions use that. Africa's using it all over the place.
Yeah, where a lot of times you look at not even just in that sense, actually, if you look at the elderly, the adults, excuse me, they kind of have this mindset of, a broader perspective, right? Mr. Ali, as a youth, what do you think would be that step that a youth can take and youth can actually be able to make that type of change rather than, the government can do this or your representative you can contact, big, huge scale. What about just in your own community can you do?
So on a college campus, as a university student, we have a very, very, probably the best time in our lives to learn about one another and to hold events and to make sure if we want messages to get out there if we want to hold an interfaith event with the Jewish, Muslim, and Christian community on campus, we can hold that type of venue. We can bring speakers in from across the nation that are learned in certain subjects when it comes to religious dialogue, and they can educate the campus community on that certain subject.
All right, well, why don't we conclude at this point with, I would like actually to ask one more question from each panelist. What is the basic sentence, basic concluding remarks you can give, something strong that can give us a little bit more hope as to how we can combat religious intolerance, rise above this form of prejudice? What information can you give us just to sum up the entire discussion today? Mr. Ali?
Like I said before, if we can just keep an open mindset with one another, learn from one another's struggles, learn from our past, don't repeat it if it's a bad consequence.
All right, Mr. Fadlallah?
I would conclude by saying Islam is a religion of dialogue. Our religion is based on dialogue, regardless who the other side is. It is a religion of dialogue. We should always keep that dialogue open. And the more dialogue that we have, the more that we're gonna overcome this hurdle in the way and bridge the gap with every other party that we have differences with.
I think what I learned, the Ahmadiyya culture that you guys belong to and being Muslim, you need to educate that. What I was saying earlier, what we educated since these problems happened in the world in the last 20 years, who Chaldeans are. We separated ourselves away to explain who we are to help others. At the same time, we're helping ourselves. As your community that is located in Pakistan and beyond, you need to educate the rest of the world who you are, just the way I learned. From the other issue that the retailer was talking about is I'm in the healthcare industry with the government. And I got a lot of Pakistanis and Indians and Muslim friends are in the business. They always let me go in the door first. They say if we go in, they may not wait on us, or they go in, they may not talk to us. We go in, they may not negotiate with us. So I think you take your group and your community, and this is a fine show. I want to thank, I'm proud to be on it, is basically I can almost see it. I was doing these shows back in 82, 83 for our community. And they go, I thought you were from Lebanon. I thought you were from Palestine. I thought you were from Egypt. You know what I'm saying? So we say, no, I'm from Iraq. Oh, Iran? They didn't know in the 79 war, the hostages war, that everything was Iran. During the 90s with Saddam Hussein, then they understood. I think your community is very important to take the youth to educate the elder. You know, usually the guy in the middle somehow are caught here between the elder and the young coming up. But the young is changing the world in the future and get the message out. I think you should get on your internet. You should get on and blast out to understand who you are and be proud who you are. Don't ever put your head down walking in anywhere and thinking that somebody blew something in Islamabad, that it was you and that you feel bad. Just be proud of who you are when you walk into the room or whoever you're dealing with.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
I think on a world stage, when you highlight a prejudice, you'll find that the majority of like-minded people that have the human spirit in the forefront of their thoughts will find that prejudice is ugly. So our job is to really bring a spotlight and highlight a religious intolerance or a prejudice. And then anytime we find that same intolerance or that same prejudice being focused on another group, we run to that other group's aid just as fast as we want them to run to ours. So I think that I would say what the youth can do is expand the scope from worrying only about what's happening to, if I'm an Ahmadi, if I worry about more than just what's happening to me as an Ahmadi or to my relatives that are in Pakistan that are Ahmadis. If I worry about what's right and what's wrong, if I find that prejudice and intolerance to anyone, to a Christian in Iraq that's a friend of John's, if I start coming to the aid of that person as well, they will come to my aid. So I think my advice to the youth is expand your scope, find intolerance and prejudice, and then help those people, whether they're your own or they're someone else's. And that will then breed that attitude that will help the rest of the world see that this is the higher level of cause that we have, which is to be a humanitarian.
Jazakallah. Thank you so much. Thank you again, panel. Thank you to our audience as well for the views and ideas that we have shared. And thank you to our viewers over at home. If you would like to learn more about Real Talk and how we do things over on this end, by all means, you could visit our website at www.mta.tv/realtalk. You could obviously email us too at realtalk@mta.tv, or join us on Twitter with the @ MTA_Real Talk. We thank you again. We learned quite a few things in regards to prejudice and religious intolerance, and hopefully we'll be able to bridge the gap and make things a little bit better. And we ask that you come join us again for other episodes of Real Talk. Obviously, we have some real news, we have some real ideas. This is Real Talk. Thank you.